Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to have another fantastic and an incredible episode for you guys. And we're still basking in the glow of Trump's America. We're back to the great times that Trump had in his first term, and we are excited for the 2020s to be an incredible decade. So we are going to be talking more about the election this week, as probably we're going to be talking about for the rest of the month, because that is the biggest news topic. So most of what we're going to talk about today is our questions I received from our wonderful cognitive elite, with three major areas. One is Trump's demographics of who were supporting him. Two, what's next for Democrats. Three, what is the administration going to look like? There's a few other questions we're going to get to, but most of our great cognitive elite fell into asking questions in these three areas. So we will address those areas soon enough. But I first want to have a short discussion of a debate I had over the weekend with academic agent who goes by OG Roland Rat on Twitter, on X. He has been claiming for many months that the regime wants Trump, and many people are fans of him, and I think people can have disagreements, or even mocking people who are otherwise okay and fine, and we're not making a mortal enemy of OG Roland Rat, academic agent, but we can. People can have disagreements with one another. The funny thing is, like, on the internet, right, you can't have disagreements without people like, you're my mortal enemy for disagreeing with me. So, but we are going to have a disagreement on this topic of the regime wants Trump. Now, I read his full article on what the regime wants Trump, and he's always been saying, it's like, you guys don't understand the esoteric meaning of it. And actually, people do understand the esoteric meaning of it. It's like the regime wants Trump. You think that the powerful institutions in the country, the government, wants Trump. And that is frankly not true. Now, were there powerful forces that liked Trump or were open to Trump returning to the White House? Yes, there were. There were billionaires like Elon Musk. Apparently, Jeff Bezos was fine with Trump. I don't think Bezos greatly preferred Trump or did not openly back Trump, but he was fine with Trump returning. Same with Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg came very close to endorsing him. I mean, for a lot of these tech guys, it makes sense that they would like Trump to come back into office because they felt business was better for them, that their interests, that Republicans are better for their interests than Democrats. I mean, they helped Democrats win in 2020, and then Democrats went and screwed them over. And I think it was a lot of ways that they are wanting to get revenge on Democrats, that they were either supportive of Trump or, totally fine with him returning to the White House, which is completely different from how they were acting in 2020. So you have that. Yes, the Israel lobby was fine with him returning. And those are influential sources. Now, that's pretty much it for people who think that this is like all the powers. And there are many, many other factors in it. It's not just simply tech billionaires and the Israeli lobby. There is also the actual government. There is the media. And the government. You have the military, the intelligence community, the State Department. And then you have the universities. As I keep saying, the media. You have the Democratic Party. You have many institutions that really strongly oppose. I mean, obviously the Democrats are always going to oppose. But if you look at how the media is reacting, and the media is very deeply tied within the government, the mainstream media, they get their sources from the Pentagon. They talk to the CIA. They talk to the State Department. They talk to a lot of the members of the bureaucracy. And they were continually calling Trump Hitler. And even if you talk about the Israeli lobby, I mean, Jews overwhelmingly voted Democrat. So, if you think that that's like, if majority of them voted for Trump, maybe you could go along with that line. But they still strongly voted for Kamala, despite this issue over Israel. And even with the powerful forces, they were not overwhelmingly on the side of Trump. Yes, Bill Ackman was pro-Trump. Yes, Elon was pro-Trump. But even with the tech world, most of the tech world was still pro-Kamala. It's just that a lot of the big honchos in there were either open to Trump or backing him. And even with the going to the Israeli lobby, a vast majority of Jews still voted Democrat. So and most of them are still very pro-Israel. It's not just all the young Jews who don't who don't care about Israel as much as they did before. It was primarily, or let me go back on this. I misspoke, but it was even though with some powerful people peeling off and going full on pro-Trump, and even with the Israeli lobby probably being more pro-Trump, there was still openness to being pro-Kamala among that faction. Was not as universally behind Trump as the media was universally behind Kamala, or the government was universally behind Kamala. And there is a lot of trepidation among elements within the regime that is there. Now, if you view Elon Musk and Bill Ackman and Michael Rappaport, which is cited in an academic agent's article explaining it as the regime. Well, I don't know. I guess you can say that, but I don't. I think Mark Milley, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA director, State Department, the heads of CNN, a lot of these guys were not as pro-Trump. Now, even with some of the Wall Street world, there was more openness to Trump being there. But the exact desire and universal support for him that you could see in powerful elements among Kamala, it wasn't there. And still, more wealthy people backed Kamala than they did Trump. I mean, Kamala raised far more money, and it was also top dollar donors, much more than Trump. Trump was still dependent on small dollar donors throughout this campaign. Yeah, Elon Musk was giving him money, but there wasn't that many other billionaires and wealthy people giving him as much money as with Kamala and the Democrats. Kamala would just have these top dollar fundraisers and all these wealthy people would be there. Hollywood was still universally behind Kamala. So, the regime still wanted Kamala, but the difference is that with the people and the culture, it is harder for them to control it as they could in 2020. When COVID lockdowns were there, they were able to have the highest form of social media censorship. And they were also able to punish podcasters and other alternative media outlets that may have given Trump a voice. And they've lost a lot of that power in the last 4 years due to Elon buying Twitter. And that has allowed more freedom and free speech to reign supreme. And thus there has been given more power to the people to voice their opinions. And they have picked Trump. Now, I think you could argue the regime is not as worried about Trump or as terrified about Trump returning to office as they were in 2020. In 2020, the regime was prepared to launch a coup if the results had been outright pro-Trump in 2020. They had already planned for that. There's the Time magazine article about the conspiracy that the Democrats had built up with unions, the Chamber of Commerce, all these different elements that are connected to the Democratic Party. And they probably would have been able to cooperate with the military and intelligence elements within the deep state. Because, the military, Trump ordered the military to disperse rioters in Washington, D.C., and the military refused the order. And also, Milley was essentially saying after January 6th is that they're overthrowing Trump and that his supporters are brown shirts. And he was also created a back channel with Chinese military to go around Trump to tell them we're not going to promise a war. He committed treason against Trump, against the American government. But that was just how much the regime was dedicated against Trump. I think this time they're still opposed to Trump because they're worried about what he's going to do in Ukraine. They're worried about what he's going to do with the federal bureaucracy. They're worried about, these things he might do on immigration, is that a lot of the regime doesn't want to do anything on immigration. They're worried about what he's going to do with DEI because they're ideologically committed to DEI. They're worried about what he's going to do with affirmative action because the military and a lot of these major corporations are still defending affirmative action and these racial quotas. If you looked at who was filing briefs in favor of affirmative action during the affirmative action case to the Supreme Court, all these major corporations and the military were upholding it, is that diversity is a prime virtue for America. And so they did not want Trump back. But, some of the just knee-jerk fear and animosity towards Trump is just not there as it was in 2020, as it were in 2020. And it's not there even in 2016. The regime would rather keep Kamala and the Democrats rather than have Trump. Because there is tremendous worries. I mean, the media is not an island that is not getting messages from powerful elements in the government. And when you're talking about the regime, I mean, it's primarily the government and, the built-in entrenched parts of it, the deep state and the federal bureaucracy, the military, and the senior military brass and the intelligence community. And they were all universally opposed to Trump. They've always been universally opposed to Trump. I mean, they tried to overthrow him. They ran that horrible campaign against him in 2016. They made up the Russia gate and all that crap. And then in 2020, they effectively deposed him before he left office. And they're still very anti-Trump. But I think that they're limited and they're weakened in their ability to exert the type of power they had during COVID. And also the media is in a declining state. The mainstream media is. I mean, they've been laying off workers. They don't really have as many to hire all these guys to be Antifa reporters to whip up hysteria and go after every single Trump supporter. So it's more that their power has been weakened since 2020, and that allowed Trump to enter office. If Trump was still effectively banned from social media, where YouTube could ban even speeches of him, if somebody posted a rally speech from Trump, and YouTube was banning this still into 2022, I think it would have been much tougher for Trump to run for office. And even you could have seen networks say, we refuse to air Trump ads, which was starting to happen in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, is that major networks and local news networks are like saying, we can't run this. This is racist. Meanwhile, now he's running ads about the Haitians and stuff, and all these networks have to take it. So it's just a different culture. Is that the people were no longer willing to go along with the same type of totalitarian setup that they were in the very beginning of this decade, and that allowed Trump to take power. And so the real thing is that the people, not the regime, picked Trump. Now, you could argue the regime is less terrified of Trump than they were in the past. That is true. But they still don't want Trump. They would still prefer the Democrats. And to say regime wants Trump is just inaccurate and wrong. They don't want Trump. There are more powerful elements. There are more billionaires, but still the majority of wealthy people and money backed Kamala. I think a lot of these, there is wealthy people who were okay with it, both on Wall Street and tech world, but still all these wealthy guys around Google were making big money raising big money for Kamala, people like Reid Hoffman and Eric Schmidt. So you did have those elements, but also those elements outweighed what Trump is. And now the thing about Trump is that in order to gain power, to have effectiveness, to implement your agenda, you do have to have powerful elements behind you so that you can combat the overwhelming influence of the regime. That's what was a huge problem in Trump's first term, is that the regime as an entire whole, even with the Republican leadership, was opposed to Trump. And that limited his ability to implement his agenda. Now that he has a little bit more, he has a higher number of powerful elements. Still, a lot of them don't want Trump and oppose him, but he has enough people to help him. He has a better opportunity to implement his agenda. You just can't hope that the entirety of the system is opposed to you, and then you have any hope of ruling and effectively governing. You need some elements to back you and to help you out to implement agenda, and also to chip away at the regime's power and negative influence. And so I don't know why it's as much of a negative thing. I think one thing with academic agent that he says that I sort of agree with was his final thing is like, oh, he's going to return us to the 90s. They want to put the woke away. It's not so much the regime wants this, because it's saying like the regime needs to get white men back in the military, but I said I was sort of agreeing with this. I'm actually not, but I think the people want the 90s return, which something I've always said is that the masses are not as right-wing and keyed as we want. Now, they're right-wing enough in that they voted for Trump, so we'll take what we can get. But a lot of them just want to return to the 90s. And they want, politically incorrect comedies playing at the movie theaters. They don't want to have to be required to use their gender pronouns in business emails. They don't want to have to undergo DEI training that tells them that they're evil for being white. They want this wokeness off their back. I don't think that's fine. I think we agree with that. But that's it. They're not going, they don't want an integralist state or any of the type of ideas that the online right is. They simply want wokeness to be put safely in a corner where it doesn't impact their life and they can enjoy life free of politics. That's a part of the FanDuel American mindset. And that's more the people rather than the regime. Now, the regime does need white men more in the military, but guess what? They're not really on their own. They're not curbing DEI. If they were really serious about this and it was showing a sign of Trump, they would have already said, we're getting rid of DEI. We're getting rid of wokeness. We're going back to all our 90s advertising. I mean, they've changed up some of their advertising because like in 2021, they would have like, oh, I was raised by lesbian parents and the army allows me to be who I am. And it's no type of message for a masculine young man. And they've been trying to do this. They did it with that black actor who got in trouble for, I think Jonathan Strong is his name, who got in trouble for beating his girlfriend. But I forget it was the Marines or Army who did it, and it was like a very masculine ad. But then they had to pull it because the guy like a week later got charged with domestic assault. If they're really dead serious about this, they would be already curbing DEI on their own, which they don't want to. They still have an ideological commitment to it. It has to come from the right to implement this. Even with Claudine Gay. They didn't really want to get rid of Claudine Gay until it became too embarrassing for them. And they got rid of Claudine Gay not because she was DEI, but because of the Israel stuff. They still fully support the DEI stuff at all these major universities, and they wish they could go back to affirmative action and assessing race, but they're not due to the right wing's efforts and some elements that have power within the system. It's been curbed, but the majority elements are still overwhelmingly opposed to Trump. So, to meet in the middle, I don't want to be too, making too big of a stink about this. I think you can accurately say that the regime is less opposed to Trump than they were in 2020. But that's not saying a whole lot, because in 2020, they would have overthrown Trump. I mean, there was they were planning a coup if he had secured the election results. That's like a very high, it's only down from there. You can only go down from there. So I would agree with that. And if that had been its case, is the regime is less opposed to Trump than they had been in the past, that would be true. But actually wanting Trump, that is not true. They still wanted Kamala, but they feel our elements within it are willing to work with him. Some powerful forces do think that they prefer Trump, but even these guys are at the mercy of the government. Elon Musk, a big reason why he backed Trump is because he was frightened of what the government was going to do to him if Kamala won, which is a legitimate concern, and I think he was right to oppose them because they were going to go after him for political reasons. Nothing to do with how he's running his businesses or anything. It was purely politics, and they were going to find the crime. And he backed Trump to do that. But if he was the regime, he would be telling the regime what to do, not that the regime, he's frightened of what the regime is going to do to him. So that's just something that you have to consider. So that's the only point. I want to just emphasize that the people chose Trump, not the regime. Yes, the regime is less opposed to him than they were in 2020, but that is not saying as much as you think it would say. They still wanted Kamala, but they are less opposed to him than they were in the past. But that doesn't translate. Less opposed does not equal want. And so that is my take on that. So now we're going to go to our wonderful Conflict questions. And I have a new pitch. I've done up a new pitch, as some of our newer Cognitive Elite members have suggested a way of changing it up. So, as a reminder, you too can get the power to ask me questions or suggest guests and topics and get access to our IQ supplements and mailbag if you sign up for the Cotton Elite option at Highly Respected Substack. And that's at highly-respected.com. And for less than $16 a month, you can ask as many questions as you want and suggestions. And we have one new Cotton Elite member, Mish House, who is taking full advantage of it to ask as many questions as to his heart's content. And I think you guys can all have that power. And people really enjoy it. And if you would prefer just to enjoy the exclusive content open to paid subscribers, you can just subscribe to Highly Respected's Substack and get access to the IQ supplements and mailbag. So with that pitch in mind, we're going to work on it a little bit more, but some people have made some great suggestions to it. We are going to start off with what Trump's staff is going to look like. I've got a lot of questions about Susie Wiles and who he's going to appoint. First person to ask this, I'm just going to include everyone who's asked this and then just go off on what Trump's admin may look like. First person asked for this is none other than K-Max. K-Max asks, Scott, what should Trump do to rectify some of the mistakes from the first term, at least from our perspective? More Stephen Miller and Chris Kobach types on immigration. Any other picks for his staff you really hope he makes, Scott? Finally, his first pick for chief of staff is Susie Wiles. Should we be concerned about it? Jeb Bush loves it. John Chandler also asked about it. He said, curious to hear you discuss the news that Pompeo and Haley and apparently Jared Ivanka won't be joining the new administration. Does this mean more white pills are on the way or realistic? What should we expect from the new administration? And what are your thoughts on Susie Wiles, etc.? So we've got that. I think we've got one more person who asked in the general direction of this question. So let me go find that. So the third guy is Flores with this, and this is the last one asking about staff. He said, do you think Trump will follow through and appoint RFK to the FDA or some other office related to health or diet? And if so, do you think he will have any substantial effects on public health? So that's one very specific. There might have been some others. I looked thoroughly. So we'll just go over the staff. On the Susie Wiles question, because we'll address that first, I think it's fine. Like, one, she ran a successful campaign. You know, it was a historic campaign. Republicans haven't won this big since the 80s. She's obviously going to get rewarded. From people who know her, it's not that bad. La Savita is usually people badmouth more. Wiles is definitely better than Priebus and Mick Mulvaney and John Kelly, who were there in the first term. Meadows, I'm not sure if she'll be better than Meadows, but she'll be there. I think it'll be fine with Susie Wiles. It could be a lot worse. She's definitely an improvement over who Trump's first chiefs of staff were in his first term. So that's my thoughts on that. A lot of people just don't like Susie Wiles for, they were wanting to get rid of her, in August, but she ran and won a successful campaign. You can't, it's like complaining like a Super Bowl champion can't get his Super Bowl rings. They won the Super Bowl. They're a winner. You can't complain about what they receive in return. So, I think it's fine with her. Now, some of the other picks on who he might go with, and some of the internal picks with Jared and Ivanka. Well, I think Jared and Ivanka are trying to make money and they're worried about their reputations among the elites that they're with, and I don't think they want a direct role with it. From what I told, Jared and Ivanka are still communicating with Trump, but I don't know. A lot of the problems stem from that the entire Republican leadership opposed Trump and advised him on very shitty picks and decisions. We focus a lot more on Jared when a lot of the focus should be on Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan giving him horrible advice. And fortunately, neither of those people are going to be advising Trump in his second term. And I don't think Jared is going to be as influential as he was in the first term. So this is a positive. Now, on Pompeo and Haley, they were not going to get spots in the administration. They're both attacking Trump within the last year. I mean, Pompeo was expected to run against Trump, but then he realized he was the only one smart enough to realize this is a bad idea and stop running. But he still made a lot of comments attacking Trump, and Trump remembered that. And he's not going to appoint Pompeo. And most of MAGA world doesn't like Pompeo. he's done. He's not going to appoint him once again to Secretary of State. There's too many other people to reward, and he doesn't have enough clout to get that job. Haley ran against him. There's no reason to reward her. He has no desire to reward enemies he crushed in the primary. And what you're seeing now is a lot of people float themselves for these jobs and hoping that some, like Elon Musk or some other elements within the Trump world, are going to advocate for them. One of the funniest things is that people have been complaining about Thomas Massie being relegated to agricultural secretary. They're taking him out. He's been relegated to this. It's like, one, Massie himself is the one floating him to be agricultural secretary for the purpose of Elon Musk picking up on it and then advocating for him. Because otherwise he's not getting a job. Because Massie, a month before the election, was telling people to write in Ron DeSantis in their ballots. He was never a Trump supporter throughout this campaign. Now, I know a lot of people like him, and I like him, a lot of the things he does on foreign policy. But, if the point of Trump's campaign needs to be rewarding loyalists, not DeSantoids who, at the very last moment, decide to pick Trump for their political fortunes. And Massie can't even get confirmed as agricultural secretary because the party establishment hates him. And he was anti-Trump, he through in the primaries anti-Trump, and he's telling people to write in DeSantis. Now he changed his mind. It's like, oh, actually, I'm voting for Trump. But there was a lot of other people who didn't have that problem of telling people to write in Ron DeSantis in October. So he's not going to get it. And people are like, oh, no, he should be CIA director. He's never getting these jobs, okay? It's like some people are proposing like really unrealistic stuff that's never going to happen. Like Eric Prince for Secretary of State. Eric Prince is not going to get that. He can't be confirmed because he's a mercenary. He's not going to get Secretary of Defense. Tulsi Gabbard is not going to get Secretary of State. There's just like people throwing, like I saw somebody like suggesting Ron Paul for Secretary of Treasury. It's like Ron Paul's on the verge of death, and he would also never get confirmed. So some people need to be having more realistic expectations. I think people are like setting a high mark for like imagining Alex Jones is going to get a cabinet position, and that's just never going to happen. Even this problem with RFK. RFK knows he can't get a cabinet spot. So they're going to appoint him to something that doesn't require Senate confirmation. They're going to make him like health czar or something. But he's not going to be head of FDA or HHS or Senate, anything like that because he can't get confirmed in the Senate. And that's just the fact of life. Now, we can get much better people than he did in his first term, but you need to be a little bit more realistic about who those people are going to be. And I think people are just like throwing out. And I think they're setting such a high mark for what they expect. And of course, they're going to get disappointed if they think that, Tulsi Gabbard's going to be Secretary of State and Massie, who was telling people to write in DeSantis, is going to be CIA director. So, it's, it has nothing to do with Massie's politics. It just has to do with a matter of loyalty. And he was never, he was one of the few congressmen endorsed DeSantis, campaigned for him, continually attacked Trump, up until like the very final weeks, and they're keeping track of that. So it has nothing. If he had been a strong Trump surrogate and advocate, maybe he could get agricultural secretary, even with the opposition from neocons and the Israeli lobby. But they would go to bat for him if he was a strong surrogate, but he wasn't. And all these people are like, reward your friends and punish your enemies. It's like, well, in this situation, I don't think Massie would count. Yeah, they'll be like, oh, he supported Trump in the end, but, he didn't support Trump when it mattered. And so that's it. So that's it with the matter of who would be in his cabinet and staff picks. I think it's going to be a lot better with that. I guess with the Secretary of State, some of it could be bad. Like, I don't want Rick Grinnell there, and I'm worried they're going to pick Rick Grinnell. I don't want Rubio. I don't think they're going to pick Rubio because I don't think there's as many people advocating for him in MAGA world. I'd prefer Bill Hagerty. Hagerty is a more sensible choice than Grinnell. Grinnell, I think, is going to raise the temperature in the Middle East, which I think we need to do the opposite. And I don't really trust Grinnell. A lot of Grinnell was behind a lot of the bad stuff in the first term, but there's a lot of Trump elements are very, especially online, who are who are friends with Grinnell, so they advocate for him. But I prefer Haggerty in that position. Um, Other people, it's like too early on to figure out who's going to be Attorney General. They're really setting out for Secretary of State. Vivek is in the running for Secretary of State, but there's going to be way too much opposition towards him to getting that pick, and there's too many people that are owed a favor or too high up in the Trump world for them just to go with Vivek. And Vivek, they can just give another cabinet position. Giving him education would be awesome, particularly education. That would be great to have Vivek there. So Vivek is going to get something from the Trump campaign, but I don't think it's going to be Secretary of State. Stephen Miller's going to have a high up position in the Trump administration. I don't know if they're going to try to make him DHS. I don't know how Senate confirmation would go. He'd probably get confirmed, but they might just have a non-Senate position for him. But it's just going to be better on the personnel in general, because they're not going to be relying on Reince Priebus to get all these never Trump cucks to staff the administration. Even though they're like saying Project 2025 is blackballed, it's really just a handful of people involved with it who are not going to have much of a say in the admin, but they're going to still use a lot of that roster. There's also similar groups that have been putting up rosters of very strong right-wing people, and there's more of a game plan for what they're going to do in the admin. There was no game plan when they went in 2016, and thus they relied on Reince Priebus, Paul Ryan, and Mitch McConnell to set the game plan. They've been setting a game plan for much of the admin. And even though it might not be exactly Project 2025, it's going to be Project 2025 like stuff. If you look at his immigration plan, he has a much more detailed, solid plan than going into the White House than he did in 2016. And they're going to be trying hard to implement that. And I think his first objective is going to do something on immigration, probably legislatively. I think they're going to try to get money for the border and ICE and Border Patrol, and just tried to ram that through to get approval, so then they can start doing mass deportations and secure the border. I think they'll try to do something like that rather than try to repeal Obamacare. And I think on an executive level, they're going to have more of a solid, coherent plan to implement a lot of his policies, especially when it comes to DEI and immigration and affirmative action. So that is what it's about. So I think the staff picks are going to be fine. You guys, the main thing is people shouldn't be unrealistic about what the staff picks are going to be like, because I see people are just like all over the place with that. And I'm like, man, you guys are going to be all disappointed before he gets in. And people are like, oh, Trump has betrayed us. I even guys go into my group chats like, Trump has betrayed us that he's only giving Massie agricultural secretary, which he's probably not even going to give. I mean, if he gives it, that's good, but I don't think he is, because of rewarding your friends, and Massie is not one of his friends. So, and that's a pretty important position, a cabinet position. I don't think it's going to go to Massie. It might if Elon Musk takes it up. Elon Musk is going to have a very influential role in staffing the administration, which is going to be a good thing. And you didn't really have a force like that in 2016. So I'm much more white-pilled about the staff picks. I just think people need to be a little bit more realistic. And if they hype themselves up with these very unrealistic picks, they're going to be disappointed. And you shouldn't be disappointed if you're suggesting something that's never going to happen. So that's my thoughts on the staff picks. And on RFK, no, RFK can only, that specifically, he cannot get he cannot get Senate confirmation. So they're just going to create a position for him. The Senate leadership fight we'll get to in a moment. I'm going to clear up some other questions. Flores has a question on that, so I'm not forgetting it. But he had another question. Also, I'm not sure if you read it, but what are your thoughts on Mr. Grove's article on building a Trump movement to last? Yeah, that was on Conundrum Cluster, the Substack. I think I recommend it in my recommendations. I'm pretty sure I do. It's a pretty good article. I would say I'm positive about it. I just don't. Maybe I just have a different focus on things from Mystery Grove and looking into the future. And it's almost I don't want to use the term conspiracy because it's not imagining like how you conspiracy, but it's like creating a right wing conspiracy to implement these goals. So it might be a little bit too romantic. Maybe is the word on the ideas of it, but I'm generally supportive of it. I think it has the right gist, especially of his comments of just how the right has gone crazy over the last few years, and the game plan is fine. So that would be my thoughts on that. I'm going to do the Democratic questions because I've got a few questions on that. Let me make sure who I all got. Yeah, there's 3 questions relating to the Democrats here. So, I'm going to get to those. The demographic breakdowns and the Senate leadership fight we'll get to in a moment. So I'm going to go over the Democratic questions. Werner has 2 questions on it. He said, do you think the left will put away the woke to appeal to white and Hispanic men? On the same note, you think that there will return to a more high IQ white male Democratic contender such as Bill Clinton, as opposed to the hardcore magicians and women they've been running the last decade? Stealth Bomber says, in the next decade or so, will we see a whitewashing from Democrats of Trump's legacy, similar to what we've seen with other past presidents? If the DNC wants to win elections again, it will be difficult to maintain the message that over half of voters are political extremists who must be excised from this country, given that Trump's now won 2 elections, or 3, depending on who you ask, and the most popular vote in 2024. The hemorrhaging of lib support among minorities further complicates the matter. And then I think we've got Dollar Bill, who has questions with this. Scott, do you agree? Well, hold on. No, I'll go to his Obama question. He's got something else on this. So 2, he said Obama in his prime was a political dynamo. The dapper, smooth talking. Hold on. We'll return to Dollar Bill's questions. I'm just going to answer this because Dollar Bills will be next. Sorry, we've got so many great questions today. I'm trying to organize them all and answer them all at the same time. So we will answer Stealth Bombers and Werner's since they're in the similar thing. Will they put the woke away? I mean, they sort of have already in this campaign. People have already been arguing as, Democrats didn't put the woke away. Will they actually try to do this? They were arguing about the 95 genders and stuff. Like, there was this awful Barry Weiss take is like, they campaigned on the 95 genders. They didn't campaign on that. They ran on a moderate message. And this is what saved like Tammy Baldwin and Elise and Slotkin, and almost helped Bob Casey and Jackie Rosen won. This is what saved a lot of their candidates, is running on a moderate message. And the Senate candidates have been running on a moderate message. Biden was too senile to run on anything. So he would just, he's brain dead, and he just, they're like, wow, you completed a sentence. We're so happy. Kamala did decide to run on a moderate message. The problem is Kamala is completely unlikable, and she's saddled with the disastrous record of the Biden administration. The people, even if they're just saying, we're going to secure the border, they already allowed the border to be completely open to allow millions of illegal immigrants in. It's too late for them to say, we want to secure the border. The average American's going to be like, well, why didn't you do this? You let in millions of illegals. And it's the same with like the economy. It's like, we're going to do something different on the economy. It's like, we got rising inflation. It costs me way more to get gas and to buy food at the grocery store. Why didn't you do this before? And the thing with Kamala is that she couldn't be a change candidate. She was saddled with the disastrous record of the Biden administration. And she was also saddled with her horrible personality that everyone hates. As I pointed out when she was going to be the candidate, is that she has the lowest approval rating of any vice president in history, which is an accomplishment, which is going to show that she was not going to be a hit on the campaign trail. The fact she was such a catastrophe in the 2020 primary, where she had to drop out before even the primaries were there, that was not a good sign for her as a presidential candidate. It's like putting in the practice squad quarterback in the playoffs. I'm using a lot of football analogies, Maybe sometimes the practice quarterback could be good, but this squad quarterback, the reason why he's there is he's a massive draft bust. He always throws interceptions. He's terrible in the pocket. You don't want him. You don't want him guiding the team in the playoffs. And that's what they did with Kamala. Is that like, all our quarterbacks are injured. Here we go. We got a practice squad guy. Let's hope for the best. And of course, they get crushed. And so that's what they did with Kamala. So it's really, they already tried to do this, and they're just going to double down on it. The problems that they have now with putting the woke away, there's limits to it. They're not going to give up on DEI. They're not going to give up on wanting woker, wanting more like Project 1619 Project textbooks for school children. And they're not going to give up on how we need more diversity, and so we should not be anti-affirmative action. But at the same time, by putting the woke away, is that they're going to go from white people suck as their main message, as they ran on in 2020, to white people are okay. And they tried to awkwardly do this with the white dudes for Harris, but then they're all apologizing for themselves and being cringe, and it just didn't work. And they try to have them bro-y, and they have a bunch of gay men who can't be bros at all. And they're talking about how they cried that Hillary lost in 2016. So it's like the complete opposite message of what bros want to hear. But they realize that this is what they need to do. They just didn't do it well. Is that they also were trying to say, we're for border security. We want to crack down on immigration. Illegal immigration, not legal. And the message they had on immigration is completely different from what they've had for the last 10 years. In 2016, Hillary Clinton's like, immigration, we're just going to allow the borders to be open. And in 2020, they're all, clamoring over each other for who wants to abolish ICE the most and abolish detention facilities. And this is why they had open borders, is they implemented this radical left-wing agenda on immigration, where they even suggested an amnesty bill, and they didn't even bother to put border security in there. They just wanted the whole world to come here. And the American people were upset about this. The regime was okay with it, but the people weren't. So that is something to keep in mind with that. They've already tried to work on it. I mean, there are limits to it. They are dependent on black voters. They can't, like on crime, they really can't go to being too tough on crime. On immigration, the Hispanic lobby is still there, but they have gone up against them to try to have a more moderate image on immigration. I mean, the Hispanic lobby was even anti these minor measures that the Biden administration has tried to implement in order to save themselves in this election. So they have gone up against that, but there are lobbies that limits them to how far they can go. But they can have a reputation of being, we're nice, friendly, centrist, moderate Democrats, and this is who we're going to be. And on that note, with Werner, is like saying that they want a high IQ white male Democratic contender such as Bill Clinton. That's most likely who's going to be their choice in 2028. It's going to be Bashir, Shapiro, minority people who's like, he's not white. Okay, for the general population, they're going to say he's a white guy. They're not going to say he's not white, he's Jewish. That's good. Well, they might have that conversation, but for non-whites, he's going to count as white. And especially for the Democratic coalition, he's going to count as white. Him, Shapiro, Newsom, Pritzker, I guess, will run. He also has they'll say he's not white like Shapiro, but I don't know. I don't know who the hell's going to vote for Pritzker. He's this fat, ugly guy, and he's a billionaire. But he's going to try to run as a moderate Democrat. Christopher Murphy will probably try to run like that if he decides to run. But Newsom, Shapiro, potentially Fetterman, Andy Bashir, even Whitmer is going to run as a moderate Democrat. Obviously, she's not a white male. I think she's going to be a disaster. I think most people are going to find her to be a bitch and not vote for her. It's going to be a similar problem that, Warren had and Kamala had in the 2020s, that they look great on paper. They look like they're going to be fine. But then people are like, I don't really like her. She seems like a bitch. It's going to be a huge problem with Whitmer. They're likely to pick a white male Democratic centrist, or centrist, and I'm using that in quotation marks. I mean, Bashir is a genuinely centrist, but the rest of them are just pretending. And they're all going to run in that same lane, which if there's like 4, 5, 6 guys, all like top contenders running in that lane, it leaves a wide open lane to be a Bernie type and to double down on woke. But I don't know who would take that up. I think it might be AOC. I don't know if she'll have the guts to run, but that's the only person I could see running right now. And it's going to be a wide open lane for somebody to take up because no one's going to be running in that lane. Whoever runs in it is going to be a contender. They might not win the nomination, but they're going to win primary races. But if there's such a buildup in the one moderate lane, that could open up for a Bernie type to win. Which that almost happened in 2020, where there was all these people, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Bloomberg, Biden, were all competing in this lane, and then it was leaving it wide open for Bernie, and Bernie looked like he was on his way to winning the primary, and then all those people dropped out and backed Biden, and Biden defeated Bernie. You may see a similar situation in 2028. It's a long ways to go, but I think the most likely person to win is going to be a high IQ white male Democratic contender such as Bill Clinton, who's running a more moderate campaign than they certainly ran in 2020, and is running the campaign they wish they could have run in 2024. But then they had Kamala and Tim Walz at the helm, and it was a disaster. Going along with Stealth Bomber about the Trump whitewashing Trump's legacy, it's not going to go into like George W. Bush territory where they went from seeing him as the Hitler to thinking we want George W. Bush back. I mean, they did this with a lot of Republicans with the exception of Reagan. I mean, the only reason why they're liking Reagan now is it's like so far away, and there's all these Democrats who were too young or not even alive to remember Reagan that they sort of had, but they don't really have a real whitewashing of Reagan and Nixon. Those are the only two that they have never really whitewashed. But they whitewashed George H.W. Bush during his son to negatively compare him to his son. They whitewashed George W. Bush once Trump got in office. They're never going to do that with Trump. There's not going to be somebody worse than Trump. You know, there's going to be people who are going to continue on Trump's legacy, or they're going to be people who are rebuking Trump's legacy in a way that Democrats would like. It's going to have a tough time rebuking Trump's legacy. It's going to be more a continuation of Trump. And so he's going to stand as someone more like Reagan or Nixon going forward. But they, as I said with the going with the first discussion about the regime, there is less of this overwhelming hostility towards Trump that there was in 2020. And some of that's just like people, like it's hard to maintain that level of anger for 9 years, you know, ever since he came down the escalator. And sometimes it dampens. A lot of the time is the media sphere is different. Also, they realize that this isn't really working. They tried to move to, oh, he's weird and a very feminine campaign in the summer, but then they felt like that wasn't working, so they went back to saying he's a fascist dictator, and that clearly didn't work. So they're going to have to do something on Trump rather than thinking of him as the great boogeyman. But they're not going to whitewash him in the way that they whitewashed the Bushes, Romney, and McCain. That's just never going to happen. They are going to have to win back these voters. On the final point of putting the woke away is that they do have this trouble of figuring out these demographics of who they're trying to win over. Because if you claim that they ran the wokest campaign possible, they did horribly among non-whites who are supposed to be the ones that are most eager for this campaign. I mean, they did very well among gays and unmarried college-educated women who are all very woke and very left-wing. But they didn't do well among minorities. And so they have to figure out like what coalition they're going after. It's going to be a weird rethinking on Democrats, especially compared to 2016. After 2016, they're like, we need to figure out how to win back working class whites. Now they're like, we need to figure out how to win back minorities. And I don't know what they're going to do. I remember their response to the State of the Union. I think this was in 2017 or 2018. They had some really old Kentucky Democrat who I don't think is still alive anymore. And they had him at a rural diner to give his like homespun response to Trump. Maybe they're going to get a rapper to give his response to Trump this time. I don't know what they would do. It is a very bad situation for Democrats. The only thing they can hope for is that the swing voters, maybe they get tired of Trump and then they move back to Democrats. That's the most they can hope for. It's a really bad election for Democrats. I think it's really one of the worst elections for a single party since 2008. 2008 was a complete rebuke of Republicans. This is a complete rebuke of Democrats. And Democrats, they don't really know what to do afterwards. And they're going to figure out. But the thing that they're most likely to do is that we need another Bill Clinton type as our leader. And they've got plenty of guys raising their hands and running towards it. Even Fetterman, in his cargo shorts and hoodie could be that guy. I think he might be too much of that type of person, but we'll see. But the conclusion is they ran a much less woke campaign than they did in 2020. Where in 2020, they're like, we needed to fund the police. We're backing Black Lives Matter riots. We're wanting to abolish ICE. We don't want to have immigration enforcement at all. We want complete open borders. We want to teach. We're saying America's a racist country on the campaign trail and is founded on white supremacy. They are not going to return to that stuff. They already moved away from that stuff. They are not declaring America as a racist country. They're trying to pretend to be border hawks. They're sort of understanding crime, but not really. And they're not trying to be as woke, and the funniest moment of this campaign, when they say that the Kamala ran too woke of a campaign, Kamala's campaign at one point tried to say that Trump is the real trans supporter, not them, is that they released an ad saying that Trump said something about, or Trump did something in his administration to acknowledge trans people or something. And a lot of the trans folks were really pissed off that Kamala's doing this, but they did this in a way to say oh, we're moderate on this issue. We are not trying to impose trans adults in your kids' bathrooms, which is a complete reversal from what in 2020, where they're like, we are putting trans people everywhere, no matter what. You better love this. We're waving the trans flag. They are not going to do this stuff in the future. They realized peak wokeness for Democrats was 2020, and they did not do this in 2020, which they won, which is an indictment more of America's mentality at the time. But they are not going to run on this shit again. So that is my thoughts on the future of the Democrats. Now we're going to go to Dollar Bill with his 2 questions on the election. He said, Scott, do you agree that it is remarkable how well the plot, as it were, of the last 3 presidential elections maps onto the structure of a Hollywood blockbuster trilogy? The 2016 election sees the heroes score a stunning upset of victory over the bad guys. The 2020 election is a dark middle chapter with a downer ending. The 2024 election sees the rightful king returning from exile to reclaim the throne he was wrongfully deprived of. It reminds me of how World War II ended like an action movie, with the Chad American heroes defeating the bad guys by setting off a giant explosion. Well, I don't know if World War II would be like that, because we didn't really have a dark... Well, maybe for Europe... Well, World War II was completely different. There was no stunning upset victory at the beginning. It was just going from Germans winning and then Germans and Japanese not winning. But it very much is structured like the Star Wars trilogy. A New Hope, they didn't expect us to blow up the Death Star. And guess what? It happens. But then you have The Empire Strikes Back in 2020, and it's a complete, it looks like it's over. Han Solo is frozen, and everything is bad. Everything's gone. And, Luke is having a traumatic episode learning Darth Vader is his father. So everything is looking grim. And then in 2024 and the Return of the Jedi, it's an absolute blowout of the Empire, and they just defeat the Empire. So yeah, it really does feel like that. I think that's why it's so white pill. But it may be like the original. People like the original movie more. They like the upset victory, this is not as much of an upset victory. It feels like it was supposed to happen. So yes, it feels very much like that. I think it makes it even more of a mythical arc for Trump to have the hero's journey, as it were. That's very much like a Hollywood movie or a great action novel. So his second question, Obama in his prime was a political dynamo. The dapper, smooth-talking community organizer won 2 presidencies, and you could argue that he, not Trump, was the first celebrity president. But that was then, this is now. The Obama we saw at Kamala's events was a shadow of his old self. a far cry from the superstar who had people fainting at his rallies in 2008. He was angry and despondent like a house slave sent out by Massie to scold the field hands. With Kamala's defeat, it's clear that the old Obama magic is gone. Scott, is he well and truly washed up? Will Obama's final act in politics be remembered as the cringe sight of him rapping to Lose Yourself at a Kamala rally? Will he retire to spend the rest of his days smoking weed and playing video games? Well, he's sort of washed up, but it's more just like time changes people of how they viewed. Obama benefited from earnest and cringe millennial culture. And they really wanted to believe in this. But that culture has completely changed. We don't want somebody going up there and delivering platitudes in a convincing manner, which is what Obama was. It's like, hope and change. We need that. Lose yourself. We got palms sweaty. We got this. I'm rapping. And, he's doing the Obama rap. And people in 2008 would have gone nuts. They would have been like, this is the most awesome thing ever. But cultures and tastes change, and Obama is suffering from that. And he's still able to motivate people, but he was not as energized about the last candidates. He didn't like Hillary. He didn't really like Biden. And he certainly didn't like Kamala. He realized Kamala's a terrible politician. Everyone did. But they're like, well, she can form complete sentences and walk on her own. So we'll go with her. And that was that. He still is able to whip up a crowd. Democrat base still likes him. They still view him as a Reagan-like figure. If Reagan was in good health, Republicans would have gone nuts for him to be speaking to crowds in the 90s and 2000s. But his health really declined after he left the presidency, so he wasn't able to be an active campaigner like Obama is. So, but in a lot of ways, you would think of like them pulling out a dinosaur. If like he was on the campaign trail in 2000 for Bush, and they had Reagan out there, they'd be like, what is this guy doing there? His like time has passed. We've moved on. And so but the Republican base would have loved seeing Reagan. And so the Democratic base still likes him, but I don't think the average voter is as hyped up for Obama anymore. It's similar to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a master campaigner. The thing is Bill Clinton is more authentic than Obama, and he would just say stuff that he felt. And he got in trouble in 2008 for saying things that they considered racist. He also said things also in 2016 where he went off the campaign agenda, where he complained that Obama administration wasn't that good, which they're supposed to be complaining that keep America great, or America's already great is their slogan. And he went off because he realized, he's a much more skilled politician than Obama. Obama actually doesn't like talking to people, He's good on the stump, but he's more awkward around people. Meanwhile, Clinton is great on the stump and is terrific at meeting people, and he really understands people. His ability to just go up to somebody, become their friend. He loves talking to people. If you ever read about him and going to events, and he would just he is energized by shaking hands and getting to know people and talking to people. Obama is not in the same mold. And so Clinton is just a master politician. But even there, his charm wore off. And in some ways, that's, Obama left in scandal of, with Monica Lewinsky and all this, which Obama didn't leave under. But Obama's just not as skilled as a politician. Like that scolding moment he had with black men, he was like so awkward. He was clearly not wanting to be there. And he's like, I need to talk to the brothers. I think you guys would like a strong woman like I got. Like Michelle. But, Kamala, she's one of the sisters. We got to support her. And, it's just such an awkward moment. Bill Clinton would have had, in his prime, when he was in his 60s, would have commanded that situation a lot better. Now, it might have been an embarrassment for the campaign for what he said, but he would connect with that room a lot more than Obama would have. Yeah, I just think his charm and magic is disappearing. People's memories, change. And, the strength of the Obama presidency is gone. We've had 2 different presidents since then. And America just doesn't, and they don't have the real romanticism around the Obama era. They did in 2020 because a lot of people after Trump years, in the hyper politicized moment, they all wanted to rewind back to 2014. And Biden was promising that, but it was very woke at the same time. But he did promise. A lot of moderates and swing voters voted for Biden because they thought we can return to 2014 after COVID and all these riots and everything. They're just like, please let us return to 2014. And then we did, and it was terrible. And then they're like, okay, we want to return to 2018 now. And so people don't have as much nostalgia for the Obama years as they did and when Biden was running for office. So yeah, the magic is wearing off, but he's still going to be an active campaigner. They still don't have a better stump speaker than Obama. And Clinton, they don't want campaigning anymore. There was a funny moment where, I think Clinton was at a McDonald's and they mistook him for Biden. And his mind is starting to go. So, yeah, he'll be, Clinton's going to be in his 80s in 2028. So they're not going to wheel out Clinton. They'll still be wheeling out Obama, though, for a very long time. But I think the old magic that he had in 2008 is definitely gone, but he's still more effective than what Democrats have. So that is dollar bill. We'll go with some of the racial breakdowns that K-Max asked this and a few other people. I'm just going to go with these questions because it's spending too much time finding these people. So K-Max said the racial breakdown I asked about last week ended up being what you said, with whites 55% and much better with Latino or Hispanic men. I read Trump won Latino men 54% to 44%. Not sure if that was nationwide or just in swing states. No, that was nationwide, but that is huge. Was this Kamala being such a bad candidate to Latino men? This is just unbelievable considering how long the GOP acted like you had to beat John McCain to win Latino voters. Your views of what happened with Latino? It's two things. One, Kamala's such a bad candidate. Well, it's three things. One, how bad the Biden administration is and people want to change. Two, Kamala's a terrible candidate. Three, Democrats have become the party of two groups that people don't like. Those are blacks and those are girl bosses. This is why so many men of many other races were voting against the Democrats, is because they associate with Democrats with these school marms and affluent white female liberals, girl bosses, and blacks. And they don't want to, and Hispanics don't want to vote for this. They don't want to vote for the party that is promising reparations for blacks and then running on Taylor Swift lyrics. They're like, this party doesn't represent me. It has nothing in my interest in mind, and it's going up against people who would actually hurt me economically and in my own interests. And so that's why she did so poorly with Hispanic men and other groups, is that they've become the party of girl bosses and awfuls and blacks. And a lot of the American public rejects that. Being the party of blacks in 2020 was a gift, and 2024 or maybe not a gift, but was enough to get some white voters. But Hispanics were rejecting it then. And they've just seen that as the party. It's unlike where all the races are coming together against whites. It's almost they're all coming together against blacks. There is a way to against blacks and girl bosses is a way to see that, and that benefits Republicans. So that is K-Max's question. I got a similar question on the chat. Mish House had a question about this. He said, Trump won 69% of the white female vote. I remember female libtards of color chiding white women over their demographic support for Trump after 2016. Do you think that kind of gender interscene nagging will occur again? Well, it was only 51% of the white female vote. If you won 69% of the white female vote, man, that would have been epic. Maybe you meant married white female vote. He still won a majority. So that's still good. 51 or 52%. No, they're already doing the nagging. On The View, they're blaming white women. They're once again going to attack white women and blame them for the election. They did this after 2020. They even blamed white women after 2022, even though they had better results than expected. No, they cannot stop their anti-white racism, so they're going to attack white women no matter what. He had a second question that's really simple, that's on a different topic. He said, you've talked down the Dead Kennedys before, and there's a lot to not like them, about them in punk rock in general, but there are a few of their songs I like, namely This Could Be Anywhere and Holiday in Cambodia. Are there any Dead Kennedy songs you actually like? No. I mean, there's some songs I would hear on is like it's on the radio. But as a matter of principle, I hate Dead Kennedys, and I actually generally hate their music. So no, I don't like any of their songs. Sorry to disappoint on this matter. Next up, we have a new questioner who I should have asked him for his pseudonym, but we'll just call him M for right now. He says, I think you mentioned on your latest episode that you might be doing an IQ supplement on this, so perhaps you'll touch on it then. But my question is about the concept of demographics or destiny. With Trump having probably the strongest Republican performance ever with Hispanic voters, many people are talking about how the GOP coalition is now diverse and how great that is. And commentators like Richard Hanania and even Nate Silver have said that their main takeaway from this election is that demographics is destiny is not true, at least electorally. Do you agree with this notion? And if so, do you even think it's a good thing? Obviously, I'm glad that Trump won, and I'm glad Hispanics moved to the right to help with that. But in my view, Republican electoral success is not the ultimate goal of our political project. If in 25 years the GOP has won a number of elections, but the great replacement has continued, how would that be a win for us? We're all happy with the results, and perhaps it's just my cynical nature, but I fear the GOP will take the exact wrong message from this election and really double down on the concept of the multiracial working class and the base Browns, base immigrants meme. That would be a problem. I have conflicting notions of this. I'm writing an article about this for tomorrow, so my thoughts will be fully fleshed out about this. I thought this would be the episode today, but there's been so much to talk about the election, as you guys have learned from how we've shifted over all over this podcast. With the demographics as destiny, it's just not turning out the way that white nationalists thought, or dissident right people, as you want to talk about. It has not turned out the way that anyone thought it would be. White nationalists thought, demographics would do in the GOP, and the only hope was to adopt a white identity politics that whites would then form their own solid solidarity group and stand up for themselves as whites. It's not really happening, and also the strongest political divisions in America are between whites. And with blacks find themselves on the left-wing side, but with the other non-whites of Asians and Hispanics, they are dividing between those two sides of whites. A lot of Hispanics are assimilating or siding with red America. Some are siding with blue Americans. It's also being seen with Asians as well. So, and that's occurring right there. Now, what is that going to look like over time? The thing is with Hispanics is that the more that they assimilate to America, the more they become Republican. With Asians, it might be the opposite, because Asians are going to be assimilating to upper middle class white libtardism. So, and I think a lot of the Asian gains that Republicans receive were from these communities that are just got their citizenship and have trouble speaking English. Now, there's an incredible poll in 2018 that showed that your fluency in English and whether you were born or abroad in America determined whether you're more likely to vote for Republican. Those who were less fluent in English and were born abroad were more likely to vote Republican than those fluent in English and born in the United States among Asians. And that is true. I think Trump finally won a precinct in New York. It was like a Chinatown district where they're all speaking Chinese. And there was a lot of other areas too, which that happened. I think it was, with Hispanics, it was a little bit different because Tejanos are very pro-Trump and they're pretty, they speak Spanish, but they're like rednecks. And so I think even a lot of other areas where Hispanics are, they've just assimilated into becoming rednecks, and they've decided to, Republicans are not the black party, and they're not the party of girl bosses. So I'm gonna vote with my redneck buddies, and I'm gonna vote for the Republicans. And so I don't think it's good from a cultural and social perspective but it's not having the effect politically. And also going along with what people are wrong is that conservatives felt demographics are going to doom the GOP as well, but the answer was amnesty and to be pandering more to them, which Trump ran on. They're eating the dogs and cats, and it was the complete opposite of that, and we need to deport them all. And then immigrants and all these non-white groups are like, hell yeah. It's more like immigrants wanting to shut the door on illegal immigrants and newer immigrants, which is whatever. So that's not even working out. And then liberals thought it would give them a permanent political majority, which it's not the opposite is happening. So everyone was wrong about demographics is destiny from a political perspective. But the 2 points to take from that is that the problems are going to be cultural and social. as a society, it's going to get dumber. Our culture is going to get dumber and more ugly. It's why people dress like shit and like have face tattoos. And the Fast and Furious films are going to be like have 20 different iterations. It's also you're going to suffer with your competency of like how you have to worry about your plane crashing and stuff like that. But politically, it's not turning out to be disaster. It's only disaster culturally and socially, which it's hard to solve that politically, which I don't know quite the answer for. But it's also at the same time, it's with politically, I don't think that they're going to take as wrong lessons as they should, because there's two wrong lessons to look at this year. It's that one, we need to adopt amnesty and criminal justice reform and all this pandering shit. I think that's clear that they shouldn't do that. And amnesty is just like fully dead among Republicans. But the worst is that they're like, we need economic populism. We need to suggest, more tax credits for working class or something, which is, Trump ran on like low taxes and a traditional conservative economic agenda. And he really ran on multiracial racism that he did on multiracial populism. And, if we have a diverse coalition and it's anti-immigration, anti-DEI, anti-affirmative action, sensible economically, sensible foreign policy wise, that's still a win for us, but you do have to worry about what's going to be the effects socially and culturally. And that might require something beyond political. I mean, you have to do something cultural. I guess it's something that I aim for with the Greer Head Pledge of, no tattoos, no weed, no Marvel, no rap, which all of these things have become bigger in a multiracial America. But I mean, the real problem is just like whites. I mean, it's, the strongest coalition block for Democrats is going to be unmarried, college-educated women. I don't want to say white women because it's also going to include a lot of Asians, also obviously blacks. I don't want to make it so much that white women are the enemy, because married white women are voting majority Republican. And I think a lot of people are wanting to hate on white women, but it's like, look, only 7% of black women voted for Trump. They're the strongest demographic, but there's fewer of them. Hispanic women also voted overwhelmingly for Democrat, and I think Asian women also voted overwhelmingly for Democrats. So it's particularly unmarried, college-educated women. And we're not going to say white, even though a lot of them are going to be white. There's going to be a lot of Asians and a few Hispanics and definitely blacks among that group. But that's going to be a growing demographic, and that includes a lot of whites. And the real fight is between unmarried, college-educated white women and then working class whites. That's like the strongest probably political divide in our country between interests and these elections, and who's like the core demographic for these candidates were. That was the core demographic for Kamala, was unmarried, college-educated women. And then the core demographic for Trump was still working class whites, non-college educated, well, generally men, but also the women voted, especially if they were married, voted for Trump. And so that political divide among whites is going to remain for a very long time. And we're not going to operate as a solidarity ethnic interest group in the same way blacks are. But nobody else really is either. I mean, Asians and Hispanics, it was 60-40 among Asians. It was 54-46 among Hispanics. They're almost just as divided as whites are. It's only really blacks that are operating as a solidarity, as a full-on solid interest group. And so I don't think you're going to expect whites to operate that, because white nationalists thought that all the non-whites would combine together into one solidarity rainbow group against whites. And it's not quite happening, even though anti-racism is still very important to Democrats. It's what they want to teach in schools. It's how they want to operate on. It's why they're so supportive of immigration. So they want more diversity, want fewer white people. It's still how they operate in like the racial quotas and how they want to hire people. They didn't hire any straight white men pick any straight white men for these judicial nominations. I think every white man they picked was gay. They might have been picked one or two straight white men for all their judicial nominees. So they're very anti-white man as a matter of policy. Even if they're going to go more moderate, even when they're going to make judicial picks, it's going to be done affirmative action wise. So there is a way that race still matters, and a way with this election is that this election, Democrats are still the party of white people suck, even though they try to claim that they don't think that they suck as much. They're like, well, you have problems, but we're welcoming you in. You just got to acknowledge those problems. Meanwhile, like, white people are pretty cool is the Republican motto. And it's like all these Hispanics and Asians who don't have problems with whites. And they're like, oh, whites are okay. It's okay to be white. It's almost white people suck versus it's okay to be white, which is not so much of a statement of white nationalism or white identitarianism. It's simply just saying we like white people. There's nothing wrong with being white versus there is something wrong with being white. And so that is that still animates racial politics, but it's something very different than how people expected our politics to look. But I do share M's concerns about what's going to mean for a culture and society, but that requires some really deep thinking and some other analysis beyond the election. All right, moving along, we've got other questions. Some of these are going to have to be quick. I got way more questions than I expected. Some people I told I'm going to answer today, but I actually have to put off for the mailbag. That's awesome problem to have. It's not even a real problem, but it's an awesome thing to have. We do have time constraints. These questions come from Appalachian. Short and sweet, will Trump be able to effectively nullify the 14th Amendment and end anchor babies? That's going to be one of his toughest problems. I think he just needs to stick to it. He could issue an executive order and just let the Supreme Court decide. That's probably his best option. It's just to send an executive order, send it to the Supreme Court, and let them decide on the 14th Amendment. Whether birthright citizenship is actually upheld. Because Congress is never going to do this. So it's up to Trump to do this. Now, the only problem that might happen with the executive order is that they may say, well, the 14th Amendment may not say this, but the president doesn't have the power to end it. So just on a technicality, they may overturn Trump's decision. But the only way to find out is just to issue the executive order and then let the Supreme Court decide. I hope they do this. I think he's going to be more willing to do this while president. He may wait till like after the midterms. I don't think this is going to be a first year thing. If it's a first year thing, that's awesome. But I don't know. He might wait to do this. But the only way he's going to do this is actually send an executive order and then hope the Supreme Court nullifies it and changes the decision. I mean, it was the Supreme Court that read birthright citizenship as the way it's interpreted. That's why we have it, is thanks to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court should change it. It's not like Congress specifically outlined this and like this is what it means. Children of illegal immigrants are American citizens. It's just the interpretation of the Supreme Court that was made in cases long ago that made that interpretation the law. Second question. Women are saying they're going to start a 4B movement like in South Korea. Do they see this movement dying out within the month, or are the gender relations in America getting worse? Oh, gender relations in America are going to get worse. I don't know if they're not going to stick to like not having sex with men. It's not just not going to happen. But the gender relations in America are going to get absolutely abysmal. I am writing an article about this for Thursday. So I will have like with M's question, I'm going to have my thoughts fully fleshed out for that article. But to give a short, succinct answer, the answer is gender relations are going to get worse because marriages are going to decline. Women do have a tougher time finding men that they want to marry, which does go along with good men scarcity. I mean, the real thing with good men scarcity isn't like there's not a man who opens the door and he doesn't have good values. It's the fact that it's harder for them to find men who make more money than them. As there was this new map showing all these cities where women make more than men. And so it's harder for women to find that guy that they have in mind for their husband. And men are also falling further behind. So gender relations are just going to get worse among under 40s. So it is what it is. I had there was two questions. There was a question about I had two questions about whether Trump's going to look into the elections, but I can't find the other one. Actually, never mind. I found it. There's two different questions on this. One comes from Maverick, and another comes from a new Cotton Elite member, Sharecrop. So thank you to Sharecrop for signing up. Thank you to Maverick for continuing to support. Highly respected. So I'll go over his questions. With that, I haven't even gotten to the Senate Majority Leader question. Okay, any other questions? The Senate Majority Leader is the last question we're going to take, but we've got a lot on this. So Maverick asks, now that the 2024 election is over, we can get back to talking about the 2020 election. Trump has always stated that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen from him. So true. But lately we've seen other prominent figures like J.D. Vance and Elon Musk talking about the fraud as well. What do you think Trump will do in office to look into the results of the 2020 election or continue the narrative that was stolen? Will he try to do minor things like set up a House committee, or do you think he might go all out and make a presidential announcement that Biden was illegitimate all along? I wonder what your thoughts might now be on how history betrays it, and if Trump has the political will and support on the issue to flip the narrative when half America still thinks it was a fair election. And Sharecrop asks, similar, do you think Trump will be able to force states to fix their election systems? Constitutionally, state legislatures have the authority to make the laws for running their own elections, but there is a mechanism that can be used to make them follow certain standards. I think getting a secure system for submitting and counting votes is very popular, and the GOP must have been aware of the issue since 2020, but it seems like not much meaningful progress has been made anywhere. The only thing I saw in this election was a few legal battles to ensure GOP vote watchers had access to the rooms. Now we see both Blue Anon and Q Boomer saying there was various forms of cheating. Well, those are actually two different questions, but on the same wavelength. To Maverick's question, I don't think he's going to do this. One, it's a good way to spoil the capital that Trump has. As a matter of principle, you can say, yes, it's important. But I mean, they spent like the last 4 years trying to investigate it. And it was one of the factors that hurt them in 2022 is like over the elections. Because people don't like the idea as like, oh, that they might overturn my vote. You know, even independents didn't really like this. And they had to move Trump from talking about the 2020 election. And the fact he didn't really talk about it as much. I mean, he talked about it at the debate. But like his whole campaign was begging him, please don't bring this up. Please don't talk about this. He might have like talk about appointing someone to do this and to look into the election, but everyone wants to move on. Only really Trump doesn't want to has any. But Trump won. It's just like it's almost a bad sport. Yes, you can argue it was stolen, but at the same time, he just won. So why are you going to fixate on the past? It's like trying to say. Once again, we're bringing up another football analogy. It's our third this week. But imagine you lost the Super Bowl on a bad call the year before, but then you win in a blowout the next year. And then after the Super Bowl, you're like, we need to investigate the last Super Bowl so we can get the Vince Lombardi trophy for that year. Everyone would be like, that's a bad sport. You don't do that. And so it would be a good... He has so many important things to do, and he needs all the political capital he can get to accomplish those things. And he'd waste valuable political capital doing something that's not going to have the achievement that he thinks it's going to have. That's not going to achieve much. I mean, even if they investigate, most people are going to ignore. It's whatever. It's time. He can have a House committee. A House committee can do that on their own. Whatever. I don't think that they're going to will. Republican leadership isn't going to want to do that. But if he does do that, it's gonna be more difficult for him to do what he wants to do, because it was like the same, him firing Comey in 2017, which some people were like, well, Comey needed to go, but that derailed a lot of his administration because that created the special prosecutor, that ruined a lot of political capital that he could have to have done other stuff. It's the same gonna be here. He's got to focus on the matters at hand and mass deportations and all that, what the people voted for him. They did not vote for him to relitigate 2020. They voted for him for mass deportations and to secure the border and NDEI. So that's my opinion. On Sharecrop's question, well, he's very limited on what he can do. I mean, there's people like, well, he could withhold funds. That's going to be very difficult for them to do. The real thing is it's a state matter, which good thing is that there are elections to be held to vote for Republicans to implement the rules that Georgia did. Georgia came down hard on mail-in ballots and secured their elections. And guess what? Trump won by a lot this time compared to 2020. And other states can follow suit. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, elsewhere, That's the real solution, is to focus on elections statewide at the state legislature and the governor. And once you have Republicans in power, you can then pass these election reform laws that strengthen elections. Federally, they can't really do too much. It's up to the state. It's up to the states to decide. And I think you should be worried about the federal government being involved in state elections, because Democrats been trying to do this, and right after Biden, they tried to have a John Lewis Act, which would have allowed them to rig every election till the end of time. And generally, when federal government gets involved in state elections, it's for libtard reasons. So if Trump set that standard, that'll allow Democrats to implement something like the John Lewis Act, which is just the permanent rigging act. So I think you should be hesitant about that. I mean, he just won too. So it's also like, you just won and now you want to litigate this issue. But there is a solution, and it's on the state level, and we just need to have vote in Republican majority legislatures and a Republican governor, and they can pass Georgia's law all over the country in places we should be able to win, and we'll have secure elections. So there is a solution, but it's not really going to come from Trump. Okay, now we're going to go to the Senate Majority Leader questions. Flores asked about this, about John Thune and Cornyn. Maverick asked about this, of what do I think about the Senate Majority Leader. Maverick was particularly asking about the J.D. Vance thing, which, no. Lyndon Johnson tried to do that, and then the Senate rejected it, and the Senate's going to reject it that now as well. It's not going to be J.D. Vance. That's that's throwing it out there. I had somebody else. Like I said, a lot of the themes are similar, but I think it's actually just these two. I think it's just Flores and Maverick, and so I'll just go off. If you did ask a Senate Majority Leader question, I'm answering it right now. So just let me know if I didn't. I triple checked, and it looked like it's only these two. With the Senate Majority Leader question, it's you don't want Cornyn. That's the simple answer. Never Cornyn is my position on this. I don't think Rick Scott has the votes. Trump world is effectively endorsing him, but I don't think he has the votes for it. Probably would be better with Rick Scott, because Rick Scott is going to be more loyal to Trump, but I don't think he has the amount of votes. There was going to be another third John Barraza, who is not in the race. So it's just John Thune, Cornyn, and Rick Scott. Cornyn, it's absolutely no. You'd rather have Scott, but I don't think he's going to get it. Now, maybe in a divided field between the establishment where they're both picking Thune and Cornyn, that it could be Scott. And so that would probably be better, because I think it's just whoever gets the most votes. It's among the Senate caucus. It's not like you have to reach a threshold like with a House Speaker. So the main position is never Cornyn. Cornyn is the worst. Thune would be better than Cornyn. Scott would probably be the best, because Scott is the most desperate to be a Trump loyalist and is the one courting Trump MAGA world the most. And so that's my opinion on it. In terms of who's going to win, I have no idea, because that's all up to the Senate. But on the question of Flores asked specifically John Thune getting involved. He said, John Thune asked Trump not to get involved in the Senate leadership debate. Do you think this will alienate him to Trump and Sally Dumas to Cornyn? I don't think so. He's not. He's just demanding that they approve his recess appointments, which only Scott has affirmed definitively. Cornyn and Thune had like wiggly answers, like, "Oh, we're gonna approve all of his appointments with speed," and they didn't say anything about the recess appointments. But no, it would probably be. You just don't want Cornyn. That's my opinion. Thune is better. Scott is the best, but I'm skeptical that Scott can be it. Now, mailbag is I'm probably gonna delay the mailbag a little bit, because they're supposed to vote on this Wednesday morning. So mailbag might come out around noon, just so I can talk about this. So if you guys want to ask follow-up questions, what do I think about the Senate Majority Leadership battle? make sure to ask it then, and we'll have a lot more thoughts on it. I am going to conclude with Renaud. If I did not get to your question, we had a lot. Please just ding me and bump up the question. I did tell a lot of people that we're going to have a mailbag. Renaud, this almost should be saved for for the mailbag, but he was insistent. They're both very quick. He said, this is for your podcast. He wanted me to read. He said, congratulations on Trump's win, Scott. You brought high respectability to MAGA and helped bring about his victory. Well, thank you, Renaud. We do appreciate that. His second question, will you apologize to SEC girls for downing them by repeatedly referencing that Owen Schroyer's obviously unrepresentative video? Stay away from InfoWar, folks. Well, the under 30 crowd still voted strongly for Kamala. I think it was 54 to 43% for Kamala. So those SEC girls were still probably voting for Kamala, but they didn't make a difference. And it's in South Carolina, so it didn't matter. And if this video, which I always can bring up, he went to the University of South Carolina and was asking essentially what are sorority girls, like, who are you voting for? And they're all like, Kamala. And they're like, why? Abortion. And it was a very black-pilling video, but their votes didn't matter. His last question, do you think that Trump and Putin will be able to find a resolution to the special military operation in Ukraine that's acceptable to both American and Russian side? I doubt it, which is very unfortunate. It's difficult to imagine a deal that would be acceptable to Russia that would also not cause an avalanche of attacks across the political spectrum, accusing Trump of capitulating with Putin. The white pill here is, I sort of agree with that, but the white pill here is that Elon Musk is taking a lot of interest in the conflict and wants a resolution. I mean, he was on the call with Zelensky. It's like, and Zelensky is black-pilled right now, which should be good news for us. He's realizing that Trump's not going to side with him. I think there's going to be a major battle over this when he becomes president. Trump is going to try to make a peace deal because he likes making deals and he likes having this idea of being a negotiator for peace. And he's going to try to do it in 2025. And he's going to be more eager to do this than Biden or Kamala. Kamala will just continue fun. There's going to be no desire to ever end the war, while Trump will have it. Now, whether he can actually do that, I am hesitant to give my prediction. All I know is that Elon Musk and much more MAGA world want the war to end and to stop funding Ukraine. And it's going to be very difficult for Trump to ask for more funding for Ukraine when he's president. I think if they came up for a budget, another thing to give Ukraine, I have a feeling it would not have the success that it did in the past. So that is my thoughts on that. And that is it for Highly Respected today. We have great content later on in the weekend. I've already outlined it. I guess I haven't revealed what's the IQ supplement, so you'll have to wait for that surprise. Tomorrow we're going to have an article about demographics. Wednesday we're going to have an article, or Wednesday we'll probably cover what happened in the Senate majority race, leadership race, and other topics. Thursday we should have a question on the gender war, unless there's some other news topic that breaks, and I got to cover that. And then Friday, we're going to have a terrific IQ supplement that will be revealed on Friday. So look out for that. So until next time, stay respected.